We are now moving into weeks 9 and 10, and we will cover Learning Outcome 11, which is Develop Awareness for Students with Learning Disabilities. The two chapters we're going to cover, chapter 6 and 7, talk a lot about adaptation, modification, and differentiation, but that's stuff that's good for all students, not just your students with learning disabilities, although you could use all of those strategies for students who may be struggling. It's good to note that it is difficult to recognize the difference between a learning disability and a language learner that doesn't have a disability. It's just, especially when they're going through the silent period, it's just taking them that long to really feel like they can produce language. So be really careful when you're watching your ELL students. I've seen both things happen. I've seen students be referred to as a special needs or for an IEP that really didn't need one. They just needed more time to get the language down. And I've seen students who were referred for special needs but weren't given services because they were language learners. And so people just said, oh, we'll just give them a little bit more time. And then when years had gone by and that student was pretty far behind and it was obvious that it wasn't a language issue, but it was a learning disability, then we were wishing that we had intervened earlier before that student became frustrated. So that one's a tricky one. This book doesn't talk a lot about it, but all of those strategies would help you determine if it is a language disability, or I'm sorry, a learning disability, or just the process of learning a language. So chapter 6 gives you adaptations and modifications to make content accessible and within the student's zone of proximal development, whatever that may be, based on their background experiences, their prior schooling, their grasp on their first language. All of those things will factor into where they are and where you need to get them. This chapter does mention providing native language support, and because Arizona is English only, I can't advocate for that, but I can tell you that most ELL teachers or even regular classroom teachers that can communicate with a student in their native language, or if another student in the class can communicate, for those students who are at a very low, like level 1 and 2, that is a really good springboard to help them move forward. So if you have that ability, I would use it on a sparingly, not on a regular basis, but provide that support for students who really need it if you're able to. Chapter 6 also gives you some ideas for ways to differentiate instruction, which is a strategy for all learners, and there's lots of links to resources and other ideas in that chapter. Chapter 7 is really similar. It reinforces that students need to really interact and use English by reading, writing, listening, and speaking. The ELL classroom is not a quiet classroom. It's a very busy classroom. Students need to be immersed. It also gives you ideas, more ideas for modifications. And one thing it mentions, most of the chapter is about instructional conversations, which are based on a lot of Vygotsky's theories, and those have proven to be really beneficial, especially for higher order and critical thinking skills. So like any other strategy mentioned in this whole textbook, they will benefit your language learners and your non-language learner students. Assignments for this week include the chapter 6 and 7 summaries, as well as a lesson evaluation. So you are given, I believe, 4 choices of YouTube videos to watch and summarize and evaluate. So just pick one. You don't have to watch them all. There's a cultural inquiry assignment, which is kind of fun. People usually take this much farther than the requirements, but if you start digging and find really interesting stuff about a culture you don't know much about right now, then by all means, if you need to go over the page limit, it's totally fine. And then you have a discussion board post for these 2 weeks. We are getting down to the wire here. The last chapter, chapter 8, will be due the following 2 weeks. And then after that, we will put everything we've learned together in the form of a lesson plan, and you'll have some time to view and comment on others' lesson plans. In weeks 13 and 14, the lesson plan is due, and then after that, you have time to comment. So if you have any questions as we go along, feel free to ask. I am a little backed up because I did take spring break off in grading. So in this class specifically, it's going to take me a little while to catch up, but I will do my best to get some comments and feedback back to you as soon as possible, and I will check back in again pretty soon.